Welcome to the last part of this 4-part series on how to play Chain of Command. This part will mention rules and mechanics that were covered in the previous 3 videos, so if you haven't watched those yet, I suggest you take a look. This will help this part to make more sense, and you'll find them in the How to Play playlist on this channel or in the video description below. In this final part of this series, we're going to look at how vehicles work, how the rules deal with shock and morale, and then finally have a brief look at how to create a force in the game with the support options. But first of all, let's have a quick look at vehicles. Vehicles are generally added to a force as support when generating force lists and are usually not part of the basic lists. For this reason, vehicles can be a rare sight in Chain of Command games, and those that are present will be there to support the infantry primarily. Transport vehicles are usually left off table, but they may be present if the scenario is an ambush on a column or the like. Vehicles are activated slightly different to other units in the game. Transport vehicles are activated when the unit or the leader being transported is activated. Alternatively, a senior leader can activate a number of transports that is equal to his command initiative when he is activated. Fighting vehicles are different and will have a number of crew manning each one of the separate parts of the vehicle. Typically, this is the gunner, driver, or hull machine gunner with a commander. To activate the fighting vehicle, the commander will use his number of command initiatives for various actions, such as firing or driving. Moving and firing will make aiming more difficult, and the fire will suffer as a result. Vehicles can move at slow, fast, or flat-out speeds, rolling 1, 2, or 3 dice respectively for the amount of inches the vehicle can move. This distance moved is affected by the vehicle speed rating, which determines how well they traverse different terrain. When firing at vehicles, the firing weapon needs to have a strike value to be able to affect the armour. When the weapon fires, 2 dice are rolled with various modifiers added or subtracted depending on if the vehicle has moved, if there's shock on the firer, or other factors. The final score determines if the vehicle has been hit and will depend on whether the vehicle is in the open or obscured. Finally, the firer will roll a number of dice on each strike point value the weapon has to try to cause hits, while the vehicle will roll a number of dice depending on the armour value to try to defend against those hits. If the amount of hits is equal to or more than the armour rolls, the hits chart is consulted and a further dice is rolled to find the effect of the damage. This includes damaging the weapons, driving gear, causing panic, even destroying the vehicle. It's a simple process but slightly more complex than other firing due to the complex nature of vehicles. However, as I said before, there are relatively few vehicles on the table anyway, so it doesn't really bog down gameplay. So far I've mentioned shock but without really explaining it. Shock is central in Chain of Command and represents stress from enemy fire, disorder from moving fast, any other number of battlefield factors that will ultimately upset well-laid plans. Shock is marked with tokens or dice. I use these 7mm dice in these purpose-built bases which have a casualty figure, but you can use whatever you have at hand. The important thing is keeping track of the amount of shock on each team. Shock is applied to individual teams rather than the section, but if 2 teams are part of a section being within 4 inches of one another, they can spread the shock between them, trying to mitigate the effects a little. In its most basic effect, shock will reduce the amount a unit can move or fire. However, if the amount of shock exceeds the number of figures in the unit, then it can become pinned. A pinned unit will not be able to move and will fire at half their effect, with the firing effects of the numbers of shock also taken into account first. However, a pinned unit will increase its cover level as the men hug the ground as much as possible. If a unit takes an amount of shock that is double the number of figures remaining, then that unit will become broken. They will immediately fall back 6 inches, plus 2 dice worth of inches from the enemy that caused them to break. Broken units cannot be activated to either move or fire until their shock level is brought down to a sufficient level. Remember that leaders can use their command initiative to reduce shock on a unit, but if a turn ends and the unit is still broken, they will rout off table and are removed from the game. Shock affects individual units, but there's also the overarching force morale that will affect soldiers' abilities to fight in the game. At the beginning of the game and covered in the first video, each player rolled for their force morale. This is tracked throughout the game. Ultimately, attrition on the battlefield will grind this force morale down as catastrophic events occur. If a team or section is wiped out or broken, or a commander killed for example, the player will roll on the bad things happen table. This roll, cross-referenced with the event, shows how many points from the force morale will be lost. This ranges from no effect to -3. When force morale is above 5, then the soldiers continue as normal. However, as it drops below 4, things get increasingly bad, and the amount of command dice rolled reduce. If the force morale drops to 0 or below, then the force will either out or surrender. So we've covered the basic rules for playing Chain of Command, so now we're just going to have a quick look at the forces used in the game and how players create their orders of battle. As mentioned previously, the platoon is generally going to be the basic force. Each nationality that fought in the Second World War had slightly different organisations, and a basic late war list for Germany, Britain, America and the Soviets is presented in the rules books. There's many more available in the supplements produced on the Lardies website. Along with the force organisations, each nationality has particular characteristics which reflect the particular training that those countries undertook. So Germans have an emphasis on firepower and hand grenades. Soviets get a pre-game artillery barrage and are able to move as scouts, making them harder to target. A basic force can also be bolstered with support options. Support options are governed by the particular scenario and the difference in the opposing force's ratings, which are found in the national characteristics of the particular force. Support is drawn from the national tables, which can be found in the basic rulebook, but also in the scenarios and campaigns produced by the Lardies on their website. Support option can be drawn from each numbered support list equal to the amount of support points the player has. This can be split down in any way. So 4 points of support will allow 1 support action to be chosen from list 4, 4 options from list 1, 2 from list 2, 1 from list 1 and 1 from list 3, or any number of similar combinations, as long as you remain within the level of your support points. These support elements are added to your basic platoon. This system gives you lots of flexibility when creating your force and allows for a certain amount of balance without resorting to adding up points values. So there we've covered the basic rules. I've not touched on every single aspect, but this series of videos have looked at some of the main points that you will encounter in a game of Chain of Command. There are more advanced rules in the rulebook for the players who want to take their game to the next level, along with a lot of introductory scenarios for quick game setup. In a nice touch, there is also an explanation about the thought processes that went into designing the game, and the reasons for choices of the certain rules and mechanics. This is good as it answers many questions the player may have as to why certain things happen when they do. As a game that flows well, reflects the period of scale of fighting, Chain of Command is a popular set of rules with very good reason. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and that it helps with some of the rules questions. If you have, please subscribe for more Wargaming videos and thank you very much for watching.